So if we go back to the time of industrial revolution, what made it a revolution essentially? It was a revolution because what was possible essentially before this time and what was possible after this time was made possible due to this thing, which is industries or machinery or technology. And what we had essentially was machines that allowed us to produce a lot of commodities, way more commodities than was possible in a particular time and space. And that's what actually happened with computers when Apple popularized what is today known as a personal computer. Or even smartphones for that matter, is essentially the extension of the vision of a personal computer. Before computers became personal, and I'll come to that in a minute, well, essentially, computers were used in military and in different serious purposes, for serious purposes. But when computers became personal, a lot of attitudes towards, computers and technology changed. Why? Because if you think about computers before the Macintosh, it was only seen as something that is to be used by the people who are trained in that particular equipment. So, for instance, if you think about the sewing machine, you need to be a tailor or somebody who knows how to work with that instrument to be able to, produce garments. Now, computers had to be democratized to be truly personal. Now, it's important to remember that, if you go to any designer today, app designer or software designer, everyone is either directly or indirectly inspired by designs or designers at Apple. And Apple is inspired by another design school, popularly known as the Bauhaus. Now, Bauhaus school only lasted for very little while. It only lasted for a couple of years. But the designers from there went on to influence the rest of the world. Now, some of the companies that use Bauhaus principles include Braun, IKEA, and of course, Apple. Now, what does a personal computer mean? Now, think about it. When I say you, let's get personal. What do I mean by that? Well, what I'm talking about is I want to know you as a person. And when I say this is a personal expression, what that actually means is what I feel, what I think, what the individual person thinks, right? And that's what the computers had to be, transformed into. The reason for that is because from a business point of view, of course, you have a lot of more normal people than industrial people or serious people. And also, if computers become democratized, people can create a lot of things just like artists. Now, this is the reason why Steve Jobs defined the first Macintosh as essentially a bicycle for the mind. Now, let's actually dive deeper into what a bicycle for the mind means. Now, when you say a Macintosh is a bicycle for the mind, you're including the hardware and the software. The software is essentially the thing that actually produces the output, the thing that you actually want. But if the hardware is not approachable, is not friendly, right? You're not gonna feel like interacting with the software. So the hardware and the software needs to work together. But we're only interested in the philosophy of the software today. So if you think about the mind, what is a mind capable of? From the perspective or from the psychology of a modern designer or the designers of the personal computers, if you think about what they mean by personal computers being a bicycle for the mind, a mind is capable of producing ideas. It's capable of storing ideas, storing data. And if you go to the modern philosophers, there are two groups of people you might find. There are some people who say that mind was essentially was essentially a blank canvas, and you essentially put data on top of it, and you essentially build the whole mind yourself. And there are those people who actually say that the mind essentially has natural instincts. Okay, which means that the hardware is essentially programmed. It's pre-programmed to do certain things, to like certain things, and then the data you fill in, the circumstances is what you actually, what fills in that thing and limits that thing. So you have these two groups of people, but essentially what designers at Apple are saying is this is a vehicle for whatever whatever circumstances come your way. This mind is what defines the action. Okay, this is what tells your hand to go and reach that thing. This is what dictates the actions for the whole body, right? So if that's what dictates the whole action for the body, if you can create a machine that is personal, when I say personal, what I mean by that is if that becomes indistinguishable from the person, then you will actually elevate what is possible by a normal human. The reason this is actually a very significant insight for designers and business people especially is because if you think about human desires, right? Human desires are not just, again, by the way, only the product of the mind, but human desires are essentially unlimited. Okay, and if you give the mind the ability to extend its potential, right, then you can consume way more desires than you can individually just by yourself. So with your phone, you can produce way more of things that produce dopamine, that essentially induce or produce pleasure amongst humans. So that's what is at the heart of a personal computer. Okay, and software is not always personal. Software can be industrial. Software can be for used for defense purposes. But lot of software today, or much of the software today, is designed for personal computers like a smartphone. And obviously, one of the reasons for that is the large market size. But there's also another reason. And the reason is that there is a philosophy, that there is actually a destination. Trust me, there is a place that all designers are naturally moving towards. Now, this is not a secret group that is hidden somewhere in some place, but this is a natural instinct that I will explain in a series of videos. And one video after another, I think this concept will be very clear to you how this is a natural progression. Essentially, you don't need to be told how to feel pleasure. You just feel it, right? And all of us, want to have less pain, want to have no pain, in fact, want to live for a long time, if not forever. We don't want to have any problems, no conflicts necessarily that actually puts me down, puts you down. We try to do all of these things naturally. We just, all of the things that we're doing, for instance, all of these mechanisms like democracy, all of these instruments like law, is essentially to empower the individual for these desires. Now, the desires is what is at the center or at the heart of the thing. Now, what I mean by that is that you will certainly have to control your desires because, well, if you don't, then you're going to, produce chaos on earth. But at the same time, these desires are nevertheless, you need to acknowledge the fact that these exist, that this is what is driving you. Okay, now how you control this is certainly very important, but that's not the topic of this video. It certainly is the case that our desires don't need to be explained, they're naturally felt. And all humans will naturally go towards that site. And what will happen and what is happening in the personal computing space is that we are defining, guidelines. We're defining, what is a good thing, what is a wrong thing. There's discussions going on personal computing space. There's democratization of software, and there are more and more people who are using computers. And there's discussions about ethics and all of that. And that's the reason why people want to be part of that space, right? So it's more as computers get more and more smaller, even the military grade software is becoming or taking the shape of personal computing space, because there's more guidelines, there's more discussions, there's more research, there's more people, and there's a lot of people there. Now, of course, that's not to say that enterprise software is becoming personal. That also is kind of true, but not entirely true, in the fact that enterprise software is becoming more and more easy to use, but that's not to say that it's becoming as easy as Instagram. That's different, right? So software essentially is to empower the mind to reach towards their dopamine thing, right? Their pleasure, and it sort of maximizes pleasure, right? And these are instruments to sort of reach that reality. And I hope that explanation sort of helps you understand what software is. And the hardware essentially is the thing that houses the software. And the hardware design essentially, what hardware designers need to do is to essentially ensure that the software is approachable. So I hope that helps you understand, the whole concept, philosophy of software. With that said, I hope to see you in the next video where we'll be talking about the philosophy of AI.